It's always a pleasure to have you join us on platform. Welcome. I'm Ruth Aguela. Cotton, we know, is one of the major crops grown in the country, used in the production of fiber and other textiles materials, which is of high demand globally. Well, as long as people continue to wear clothes, there will always be demand for cotton. Nigeria has had a remarkable share in the history of cotton production, not just in Africa, but globally. In the 50s and 60s, Nigeria used to be Africa's leading cotton producer and 12th largest in the world. But the cotton production has been on the downward trend, thereby affecting export earnings. Although in the past few years, there has been interventions by the federal government to resuscitate the cotton sector because of its enormous economic benefits. With gradual progress made, there is still a huge deficit in supply that needs to be met. Some of the major cotton producing states in Nigeria include Zamfara, Kano, Kaduna, Katsina, Sokoto, Kebbi, Ogun, Ondo and Oyo. Now these states have the largest share of production. So Nigeria is still viable, if you ask, in that regard. But exploring the glaring vast potential of the cotton sector with its value chain, a gold mine waiting to be tapped. Now, you cannot talk about cotton production without the mention of the textile industry, which has also witnessed a huge decline in past decades. Modern textile manufacturing in the country started in the 50s when cotton farming was at its peak. Cotton has always been a driving force of the whole textile industry in Nigeria. So how can the nation regain its pride of place to become the largest producer of cotton in Africa? Well, the discourse on platform today is cotton production, economic value chain. And our guest is Mr. Anibe Achimugu. He's the National President, National Cotton Association of Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And just before we introduce our panelists, let's go through Mr. Anibe's profile. Mr. Achimugu obtained his first degree, that is BSc in accounting from the University of Jos, and master's degree in business administration from Southern Cross University, Malaysia. He holds a honorary Doctor of International Affairs with African Theological Education from New York, with over 28 years professional experience, part of which he has spent in corporate governance and leadership of business organizations. His career started off at Plexus Cotton Limited, Liverpool, that's in the United Kingdom, where he developed a niche in the cotton sector as sample officer. He returned to Nigeria and joined Arewa Textiles. He is currently the Managing Director or Chief Executive Officer, Arewa Cotton and Allied Product Limited, Chairman of the Cotton, Textile and Garment Sector, think tank group, among other positions in corporate organizations. He's also a member of different certified bodies. But let's leave the profile there. Once again, welcome to platform. You've done so well when it comes to cotton sector, so we're going to be exploring all of it.
Okay.
So let's introduce our panelist. Laraba Murray is on the platform again. Now, I'll tell you why. Laraba is, she's a journalist and she's vast, and she has a particular interest in cotton farming. Okay. Mr. Anibe, you find out why. She's a woman who is trying to delve into cotton farming.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Laraba, for having us.
Thank you.
For joining us, rather.
Yeah, thank you for always having me.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now, Mr. Achimugu, cotton sector. It's very glaring, you know, when Nigeria used to be at the forefront, you know, when we used to lead nations around the world. And looking back all these years and what may have happened or not happened, and then how Nigeria is trying to pick its feet back, you know, to find a place in cotton production. When you're talking of exporting, consumption, you know, the whole use. Tell us, from your experience, your wealth of experience in the cotton sector, and how vast your knowledge is, you know, you've traveled wild and you've touched every bit of it. And I want to believe you're also a cotton farmer. Okay.
Indeed.
Okay, so tell us, what actually did go wrong over the years?
Well, thank you, Ruth, for having me in the first instance and the opportunity to actually shed some more light on what is going on in the CTG sector of Nigeria. But what went wrong? You know, we look back and we say what went wrong with even the pyramids and so on and so forth, the agriculture. And I guess that a lot of people will say that the focus had shifted from agriculture to, you know, oil production. And, you know, and that's the mainstay of the economy of the nation, unfortunately, at the moment, or the generation of foreign exchange. So I think neglect happened. And, you know, that neglect translated into, for instance, poor border controls, you know, so smuggling is a major concern and a factor, you know, that affected the textile, you know, industries. And then obviously we'll talk about infrastructure, poor infrastructure. Yeah. And the first thing, obviously, on that list will be power. And because production, even at the ginning level, almost 50% of your cost is power related. So those are the kind of things. And then we always say that there's inconsistency in government policies, you know. One minute you are protecting the sector, the next minute you have opened it up, you know, to the world, you know, and where we have not actually strengthened our own, you know, industries, you know. So these are the factors actually that contributed to the decline that we began to see, you know, after the golden eras of the 80s and 70s, 80s, even into 90s. But unfortunately, like I said, when you look at the cost of production, you look at smuggling and so on and so forth. And I guess sometimes also, or not sometimes, you can also attribute the Nigerians' love for importation or imported goods. And we always get the impression that imported goods are better. But actually, I can tell you for the textile sector anyway, the fabrics that were produced in Nigeria were far better. And are still far better than those that are smuggled in. And,
you know, we're going to delve into the textile part of it, but let's look at the foundational problem, because you can have those textile readily available without the cotton. Now, if we want to look fast forward, you know, to some few years back in 2019, when the CBN's Anchors Bras program was very helpful in terms of, you know, providing grants for farmers and all of that. That was a rebound for the cotton sector, so to say. So looking back this past few years, how has that been able to make impact in the cotton sector? Are we treading on the right path?
Yes, I mean, thank you for that, because before the intervention, Nigeria was perhaps producing about 80,000 metric tons of seed cotton, you know, at farm gate level. But with the intervention in 2019, that rose to about 120,000 metric tons. And then in 2020, also with the intervention, not only with National Cotton Association of Nigeria, but CBN also supported, you know, other associations like COPMAN, you know, that is Cotton Producers and Marketers Association of Nigeria. And that rose to about 133,000 metric tons. So the intervention actually did spur interest or return of farmers, including, you know, large-scale farmers, back to cotton production. So that helped for the fact that also the intervention was able to give to each farmer 1 hectare inputs or requirement for inputs for 1 hectare. And that was what happened, not cash component, but it wasn't also a grant, it's a loan that was given to the farmers. So, and in 2019, I think we started at 67,000 farmers. That's at National Cotton Association of Nigeria. But at actual participation was 90,732 farmers thereabouts. So, and that's increased, you know, in 2020, we got to about 142,221 farmers. And then if you include, obviously, the COPMAN, and other farm, it was well over 200,000 farmers that, you know, participated in cotton production in 2020. Of course, there were the challenges, particularly in 2020, with climate change. That's a major factor that we really have to consider, not just for cotton production, but in agriculture generally. Of course, insecurity. And these are things and factors that really are beyond one's control. But we can surmount them by planning ahead, starting ahead. And you know, with agriculture generally, it is important that you don't miss the planting window. And that is really a challenge to be able to also achieve.
Okay, Laraba.
Okay, I know we're talking about the challenges, the shift, but I'm particularly interested about something that I read, that international fashion industries are beginning to pick interest in the Nigerian cotton industry. What makes us stand out? What makes our own cotton stand
Well,
out?
first and foremost, I think that the competitiveness of Nigerian cotton, so to speak, comes from the fact that you have varieties. You know, for instance, when you look at the Northeast, you are looking at medium staple cotton, which is good for, you know, bed sheets and things, or long staple that you get from the Southwest and so on. But the largest production of area and cotton is in Northwest, and that is good for, you know, denim material and such like, you know, short staple cotton. So, and I think that also, if you look at it critically, I think it's also the price is competitive. But why is it competitive? Unfortunately, it's because we do not have the structure in place, for instance, to determine exactly the quality parameters of our cotton, which, of course, cotton is traded internationally based on quality parameters. So if we don't do that, then you automatically have discounts because they say, oh, we don't know what it is, or whether, you know, it's a structured planting regime where we know uniformity is considered in terms of the seeds, where they are coming from, and they are not mixed and so on and so forth. So, but yes, there's interest in Nigerian cotton. It is cheaper for the user, end user, for instance, the spinner, to use Nigerian cotton to even blend with Egyptian cotton or with American cotton, and those are the best types of cotton in the world. So Nigerian cotton is advantageous in that sense.
Okay, I would like to also ask a follow-up question. You talked about the seeds that we have.
Yes.
And I read also somewhere, according to reports, that there's a new variety of seed, biotechnology, sorry, biocotton, that has also come into the industry, I believe, in 2019. So how has that also impacted the seeds, you know, the seed production? Because that seems to be a challenge for Nigerian cotton farmers.
Yes, not, you know, seed is a problem. Agriculture, planting material is very important. BT cotton, you know, BT technology came into play actually in 2020, not 2019, because of course the protocols have to be observed and so on through the National Biosafety Agency, you know, who helped. So that BT cotton basically is cotton seed that you know the vigor of that cotton seed, so to speak. You are almost guaranteed 100% germination rate once you plant. But it's not a magic wand. You also still have to apply the necessary agronomic practices to go along with that. But if you do it and, you know, you plant and you take care of your farm properly, you can get as much as 3 metric tons. And we're coming from, if you compare 3 metric tons from the average that we have, you know, of 450 kilograms per hectare. You know, it's a significant shift. The problem with BT cotton for me at the moment is the cost. You know, the affordability of it for the our typical farmers. So it's costly. So intervention, something has to be done in that light. But obviously, you also have conventional seeds, that are produced by the Institute of Agricultural Research in Zaria. They have the national mandate for that. And the seeds are also equally good. But the point there is that they are tired. The point there is that maybe the institute is not funded enough for them to even produce the quantities that we require to plant in Nigeria. So we have those sort of gaps. But the problem also is that we have not been able to coordinate properly, you know, the sources of our seed. So you get cotton seed coming in from Benin Republic, coming in from Cameroon, coming in from Chad, neighboring countries, even as far as, you know, Sudan in some cases. But point is that as it comes to the farmer at the market, you don't know if you're actually buying just that Benin seed or is mixed with Cameroon and so on and so forth. So that is the challenge with that.
So, but does Nigeria, because that's a genetically modified seed, and its benefit to the BT cotton, they said it's more better when we're talking pest control and high yield for cotton. But do we, generate that in Nigeria? Do we have what it takes to get that?
No, at the moment, it's
not gotten
obviously
to that point.
It's imported.
Okay.
Through a company, Mayuko Seeds, they are an Indian company, but they had to go through the process, the protocols with even the IR, Institute of Agricultural Research, and NABDA, to make sure that they meet the requirements. They tested 4 varieties, and out of the 4, 2 were selected. And like you are right, bollworm, which is a major pest for cotton, is actually reduced with the introduction of BT. You don't have to spray as many times as possible. So yes, it's costly, but there are some advantages. But if you are not able to afford it in the first instance, then you cannot even benefit from the advantages. Drought resistant.
Sorry, Lara, but just before you come in, do you know why I asked that question? Because there's been concerns about cultivation, low yield as a result of lack of high yield, for cotton. Now, before you get the right result you're looking for, to get the right yield, it starts with preparation. And if the association, talking about Cotton Association of Nigeria, wants its farmers to grow and wants the sector to bounce back, what areas are you looking at to ensure that we have that BT cotton, even though we're trying to kill the whole ideology of importation into the country, but these are beneficial items, talking about the crop, the seedlings rather. Are there areas of concerns in that regard in terms of investments, to have those seedlings brought to Nigeria?
Yes, I mean, I think, to be fair to NABDA and the government, they have insisted, so to speak, that, once you import to a certain level, you must begin to produce, in country. And that exercise actually had begun, with them training the farmers to know the parentage of the seed itself and how to, blend and so on and so forth and grow it. So that is a work in progress. It's not something that we can start almost immediately or become beneficial immediately. It's a long process. Point is now that how do we make sure, just like you're asking, that this BT cotton that provides, good yields and quality gets to the hands of the farmers, and because the yield basically translates to more money for the farmer. So like any intervention going forward, there must be a way of subsidizing that cost. Because it's all about money. So if we have the money, for instance, we can talk to the company, we can bring in 1,000 metric tons, 2,000 metric tons, that will satisfy the need of our current demand. But funding is it's a problem, it's a challenge, So if you compare it to conventional seeds, for instance, that perhaps is about 150, 200 naira, things have got up a bit now, but per kilogram, in comparison, with BT cotton, I think last year, it was almost 12,000 naira per kilogram.
Based on what you have just said, there's a question in my heart, but Laraba, go ahead, I'll bring it up.
Okay, the question in my heart, when Ruth here was introducing you, she talked about the states where have the high yield of cotton, Zamfara.
Production areas.
But I actually took it personal because my state wasn't mentioned. I'm from Adamawa State. And growing up, I know that there's this place, Ngrore, that used to have apricot. And I've not been hearing things about it. So I'd like to know, is it that we've dropped from the list?
You have not dropped from the list. Adamawa has not dropped from the list. In fact, as I can tell you now today, that there are 33 states in Nigeria that currently have the cotton production status. Okay. So, but of course, we're talking about
key
production quantities.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's why she mentioned that. So you have to look at the highest production area or zone and then state. Which is, of course, there's competition between Zamfara and Katsina, but Northwest is the highest producing zone. The second highest producing zone is the Northeast, Taraba, Adamawa, So you are actually part of it. Maybe she just didn't mention it. Okay. So, but you know, we are trying, like I said, you know, with everything else that has gone on the decline, and I think that's why we're discussing this. You know, that we need to bring back cotton production to where it was, and even to surpass where it was.
So is it to see that there's a partnership with the government of the state?
Well, I won't say there's a direct partnership, but we have, for instance, National Cotton Association of Nigeria as a state chapter with, of course, registered farmers and so on and so forth. So anything that we're doing as an association, definitely Adamawa State is part of it. Can we collaborate with the state government? Yes, because we're thinking that, you know, we have to rejig a lot of things.
Yes.
So, you know, permit me to say this. If you are working with smallholder farmers, it's sexy in the ears of everybody. Everybody wants to know that you are working with, you know, rural farmers in the field, but it's a difficult task.
You could have used the word attractive.
Okay, attractive, for instance.
Okay.
But, you know, the truth of it is that we need not only to continue to work with smallholder farmers, but we have to rejig the way and manner in which we work with them. In 2019, when the intervention came through the Central Bank of Nigeria, it was farmers in 24 states, but they were spread out, you know. So, for instance, in one local government, you can have a farmer that is, you know, in one location, and the next location is maybe 50 kilos away and so on. So you think about how do you supervise and monitor that? Difficult, right? How do you enable joint services to be enjoyed by these farmers? Very difficult. So in 2020, we said, okay, you know what, let's change our model. Let it be cluster farming, bring them together. We had a challenge, it's not a cliche, but we had a challenge with COVID-19 to get the thing right, properly, you know.
Okay.
But we tried, and we said, okay, well, this has not really worked the way we want. What do we do next? What's the possibility of working better, even with the smallholder farmers, and getting the results that we require to feed the CTG sector? So we said, okay, you know what, 2021, though we were not supported by the Central Bank of Nigeria, we felt that, look, we need to prove a point, contiguous farmland, which means that I come to you, you have 100 hectares, you have 200 hectares, you have 1,000 hectares. Like you're saying, we go to the state government, and I have to give kudos to the Zamfara state governor, because it did help us. It did allocate farmlands, but unfortunately, insecurity didn't allow us to move in on time. Point I'm making is that if you have contiguous farmland, which we experienced and we know that it works better, then you can enjoy joint services. It's one singular location. Monitoring, supervision, extension services and all that can be good. All you need to do is just to allocate farmers to the land.
You know, Zamfara is just one state out of the 33 states you've mentioned.
Yes.
And we know that Katsina is the leading producing state in the country for cotton.
They will argue with you.
They will argue it. Ogun used to be one of the best grower of cotton, quality cotton, Ogun State. Now, if we want to borrow a lead from Katsina, what are they doing differently in terms of sustainability plan? Why are they leading? You know, is there a synergy among the farmers, you know, across the states? I know it's an association, but what's the synergy like? If we want to call ourselves, talking about the nation now, self-sufficient in cotton production, then there must be committed effort for synergy.
Yes. And, you know, actually, that's what we are trying to do. Recently, we just held the first International Cotton Summit and Expo. The idea was that bring CTG. Of course, we want to speak to policymakers and the government and thank them and so on. But essentially, we wanted to bring ourselves together. And that word you used was critical, synergy, to work together. Now, if you look at what happens in Katsina, for instance, that ecosystem supports itself. The Ginas there are interested in making sure that they have their feedstock. So they have their own group of farmers, for instance, that they support. How? Most importantly, like we've been talking about, is what? Planting material. Enough planting material, good quality planting material, as best as they can handle it anyway, and they distribute that to the farmers. So there's that sort of synergy, there's that sort of collaboration that is going on. And the sheer fact that farmers in the Katsina State, Zamfara, Northwest, have all they've been traditional cotton farmers. I know you say that traditional, but they kept to theirs, so to speak, right? Year in, year out, you don't need to really convince a cotton farmer to go back to the farm to farm cotton. But, you know, when you go to Adama, you say, well, we've tried it, you know. And, you know, there's no ginnery now in Adama. That's also
part of the discouragement.
The discouragement, you know. So you see that they've shifted to farming rice, maize, which is good for us for food security. But then again, you need to be able to put in, for instance, in the Katsina axis, the Northwest, I think you have more than 20 or 30 ginneries, you know. That's where the ginneries, that's the processors of the seed cotton that the farmers produce from farm gate, you know, there. So it's encouraging. So farmers know that, look, I'll have a market, or I have a market access, people will come. So I think that's what the difference is. So if you look outside of the Northwest, in Northeast, you talk about Gombe. Well, I used to have a ginnery in Adama, Guyuk, but they all now started farming rice. But, you know, we're trying to revive all that. So if you look at that from Bauchi, no ginnery. From Taraba, there's no ginnery. You know, I can go on and on. You know, so that's important, that we are able to, first and foremost, how do I even attract the investors to bring in the ginnery or to revive their ginnery? Is production. So you're right that it's key that we get production right, sustainable production that will now spur the necessary investments that we require.
So how do you make a way, rather, to have these ginneries available? Because if that is part of the problem, why these farmers, because it's unfortunate, if we want to look at the viability for cotton sector, it's not just only, you know, adding to the GDP, there's direct and indirect job creation, and it's vast. The value chain is just, you know, mind-blowing. You have spinners, you have people who weave, you have those who call, it's just enormous. And we cannot run away from the fact that the potentials are there. So what is going to, what can be done, rather, you know, to ensure that we have these ginneries looked into, more ginneries?
Okay, you know, sorry, no, I'm not sorry, but I have to go back to the Anchor Boras program.
Okay.
You ask me anytime, I'll tell you that's one of the best programs yet for agriculture in Nigeria.
Yes.
3 main factors that Anchor Boras program provides is guaranteed minimum price for the farmer. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier, but price is key.
Yes.
Why should I suffer, do all that work, and I don't get enough, you know, to even say, oh, at the end of the season, I gained, you know? There is the inputs that the farmer requires. Cotton is stubborn. So cotton requires the right inputs, the right time for planting, and so on and so forth. The agronomy practices that you need to employ is key. Anchor Boras program provided the inputs required for 1 hectare, and I mean everything that was required, 1 hectare. We worked with the IRL to actually select and say, look, this is what will be required, vis-a-vis, you know, the zones that you are of production, and then the anchor. That is the market access we're talking about, which means that at the end of the day, all honestly the farmer needed to do was just to take care of his or her farmland, and then at the end of the day harvest and bring the cotton, because there's a market. Don't forget I talked about minimum guaranteed. In 2019 when we started, I'm proud to say that we were offering 205 naira per kilogram to a farmer, to our farmers, as against the market price, that is non-members of NACOTAN, price was around 140, 150.
Okay, I'd like to hold your thoughts there because you haven't landed in the area of the ginnery, how we can get it back. But you tell me about that when we come back from this break.
Sees that the Buhari-led administration has made remarkable progress,
like Lafia Transmission Station nearing completion.
Africa does not need charity, but partnerships that will promote the adequate investment
with the cooperation of all.
Sharing firsthand the experiences of reporters on the field as they bring to you weekly the beauty of Nigeria's diverse culture and the economic potentials therein. The Correspondents, Development through the eye of the grassroots, showing every Monday at 1:30 p.m. on the network service of the NTA, with a repeat broadcast on NTA News 24 and NTA International. Join us.
Make someone set out on a journey and not get to his or her destination.
Extremely
now,
important.
Imagine a victim who cannot reach out to these responders, who doesn't even have the phone to reach out. Hello, thank you very much for joining us on platform. I'm Ruth Aguela.
And the girl, especially if the girl is a minor, she's not yet 18 years, if she gets pregnant, realize that church girl is sent out of school and the boy is left in school.
Just park to pick the call.
So how much sensitization is the FRS?
I don't agree. A lot of people are just deaf.
Welcome back. The conversation is still cotton production, economic value chain. Now, Mr. Achimugu, you were about to tell us why we're not having this why we should have more gineries and what can be done to have these gineries in place.
Like, first and foremost, we have a total of about 52 gineries in Nigeria, with installed capacities of about 650,000 metric tons. Now, as a giner, I'm a giner as well as a farmer.
A certified one.
And if I don't get enough feedstock, then what am I doing? So if I have an installed capacity for, say, 10,000 metric tons a season, typically a season is, let's say, 6 months, though you want to reduce your ginning, activities to maybe 4 months or even less if you can.
Okay.
But point is that if you don't have enough feedstock, why would you stay open? So that's why I was kind of like concentrating on the production aspect, the need for that production, the need for sustainable production, the need for me to know as a giner that year in, year out, minimum quantities that I require, I'll be able to get. Now, I've talked about, power earlier as a challenge. For a giner particularly that is located, I won't locate my ginery in Abuja and all that, right? In the rural areas, close to where the cotton is produced. It makes economic sense and all that. But then I find that I have to actually generate my own power myself. And today, I recall we were talking, even when it was 250 naira per liter or 300 naira, we were complaining. But in some cases, in those rural areas, we're paying above 1,000 naira per liter, So these are challenges. Then, we talk about spare parts. We talk about whether there's zero duty on importation of agricultural related components and equipment and machinery, whether that is even been applied or not. And if we talk about even the export expansion grant, which is provided by NEPC, which is supposed to actually trickle back to support pricing for the farmers, for instance, to support even the additional costs that I have to bear, and so on and so forth. All those things are in place, but then, we need time to be able. So we want to work closely with NEPC. And in our program, they came and they declared that still exists. So, but we need to engage them more. And we thank them for all that. So bringing back the gineries in the first place, I think has to do with the volumes that we can produce, the volumes of cotton that is available, the quality of cotton that is produced that is available, and this other support infrastructure that is required. The gineries are there, they can be brought back, and if production continues to increase, I believe that Nigeria should be able to go back and produce more than 1 million metric tons a year of cotton. But we have to continue that drive. If we have seen that the CTG sector is important to Nigeria, it will contribute, to our GDP, we always say. But you said something, directly impacting lives of farmers. And there's no part of cotton that is wasted.
Yes.
So you can imagine, I always say that cotton CTG, if we concentrate and we push it, we're talking about wealth creation as well as job creation.
When I read about the benefits of cotton, it was mind-blowing to see that there are a lot of things you can get out of cotton, fish nets, coffee fillets, a lot of things. Even the oil from the seeds.
Exactly. Which is very, very nutritious, healthy.
Even it's edible.
Soap, the animal feed from the process, particle boards. You won't believe from, the farm, the stock of cotton. You turn it into particle boards, for, tables and things like that.
Let's look at the end products. That's the part Laraba is very much interested in. Looking at our textiles. You are the MD, Arewa Cotton Allied products. And you can't talk about cotton and not talk about textile. Textile is like the wife of cotton because that's like the end product of it. And if we want to, reminisce on the past, when we used to have Kaduna textile mills, Aba, Bendel textile mills, Nigeria textile mills.
Arewa textiles.
Arewa textiles, it's a whole lot. Now, what is the textile industry looking at now? What is the outlook like now? Oh,
very, very sad. If you look, if you look at where we were to where we are today, it's serious cause for concern. Over 180 textile mills in the past, a sector that was actually responsible for engaging the second to government in employment. And today we're talking about perhaps maybe, look, if I want to stretch it a bit, I say about 5 factories that are working today. So we've lost a lot, I've always said that for textile, you have to be competitive. You have to have the necessary support policies that will help you to be competitive, with other countries that produce cotton, that produce textile materials, right? Bangladesh and Indonesia and India and the likes, the garmenting apparel, and so on and so forth. But we're not competitive. But the first thing we need to do, I've always said, if you look at, sake of argument anyway, we have maybe our GDP is like what, $450 billion. The import bill for textile products is adjudged to be well over 4 billion. So let's say that's just 1% of our GDP. But if you translate it with foreign exchange and so on and so forth, that is close to 2 trillion naira. Imagine plowing back that 2 trillion naira, or rather retaining the 2 trillion naira in country. So the textiles industries are in a bad state. The owners have to, in fact, some of them that have kept going, I tell you, we have to give them kudos. They've tried. Funtua Textiles, ATM in Kano, and so on and so forth. The sun flags are there in Lagos. But it is challenging when you have to contend with competition from other countries, when you have to contend with the love of Nigerians for importation, when you have to contend with the smuggling aspect. So those things are very what, and power. We'll keep on going back to power and the weak infrastructures that we have. So those are the things that have really affected the growth or the decline. And then we talk about the growth. Obviously, is to address those things directly. And I'm advocate of, look, if we say that there's a benefit that we can all gain in this sector, then we need to be deliberate. So I'm talking to government, you need to be deliberate. We're talking to the development partners, we need to be deliberate in intervention. It has to be direct. I just came back from Lagos where the UK just had an event. They launched the Developing Countries Trade Scheme, And guess what? Cotton is part of the top 8 commodities that they are looking at. So yes, and to be fair to them, they said, look, what you are doing now is to what? Export raw material. But what we want to do is that give cotton products coming out of Nigeria into the UK market. I'm talking about garments, apparel, 0 duty. Now that's an opportunity we should not what? Let go and waste. Now, if they are looking at cotton and seeing the importance of cotton, that they don't grow there, but they recognize, like we said, okay, simply, necessity of life, we need to clothe ourselves.
Yes.
Then we need to clothe ourselves efficiently. So if we help the Nigerians, then we're helping ourselves. So there's a lot of talk around, projects that will ensure that value addition is brought into play in the CTG. Important. And I've always said that Nigeria has a major advantage. Why? The infrastructure is there. Those factories are there. they can be revived. Let's not forget about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. If we don't get these things right, we'll become a dumping ground. By 2050, Nigeria is adjusted to be about, 400 million people. And we continue to import. At the moment, we are doing 4 billion. So if you are talking, now then we are talking 8 billion, 10 billion. So basically, I think we really need to look at this sector. It's not because I'm a player in this sector, but it's because I see the importance and what it means for our economy. The job creation, the wealth creation that we've talked about, and so on and so forth. And that directly trickles down to what? Insecurity. If people are engaged, I don't think that, they'll have time to be kidnapping and doing other things. So there's a lot to go with that, around that.
Talking about engagement, and you've talked about it, it seems to me that it's a market where it's for the big players. Is there a space in your association for the youth to come, for the youth and women to come and see how they can also take part? And then you also talked about being deliberate about the textile industry. I'd like you to be specific, even though you said some things. I'd like you to be specific to those things that we need to do to ensure that that industry is revived, even though we have promises from outside the country.
Okay. Like, first and foremost, I'd like to say that we have recognized, the importance of the youth and women. In fact, we carried out an exercise where we wanted to actually identify our women farmers. So at that level of farming, the youths can come in. Of course, the youth of today, especially with, the internet and the exposure, nobody wants to now go with the hoe and cutlass. So we're trying to bring in mechanization that will also make it attractive, attractive to the youth and the women. These are key things. The women, one of the challenges we have seen in production, for instance, farming, is that they don't own their land. They either work for the family or work for their father or work for their husbands and all that. But like I said, what we're trying to do, we knock on doors of individuals with large parcels of land. We partner with them, and thereby we can allocate farmland to the women farmers and to the youth, So that aspect, I think, we're thinking about that aspect. We've already commenced, so that we win them. We want as many people as possible, to come into cotton production. It's important. Now, when I say deliberate, so if government sits down today and says, I want to generate 10 million jobs, how do you do that? Look at the CTG sector. And by the way, I'm an advocate not only for the CTG sector, for Nigeria, right? So I'm an advocate for even palm oil. I'm an advocate for rubber. These are commodities that have a large value chain. Point is that we do the raw production, which we must ensure that is sustainable and there's enough. So if we are able to feed, produce enough to feed our existing infrastructure, for instance, then exporting even the excess is no problem. But if you are able to produce significantly, then it's easier for the value chain to be revived. And when we say revive, for instance, can we say to be deliberate? Can we reduce the tariff of power specifically for CTG? So, look at what government is doing through the African Development Bank, the SAPZs, right? The idea is that it's joint services, so that it reduces the cost for individuals, So power will be provided, so you don't have to provide power yourself. So when we, look at it like that, then and policies, right? Currently, the Federal Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment is working on the CTG policy, which we hope would, be completed before the end of this administration, because that's a guide for the CTG sector. And let it be consistent. Let it be that the next government comes in and don't change nothing. Let's ride with it. Let's take it as far as possible. Because what we have decided about it today will not change significantly in 2 years' time. So let's run with it and see what it is. So deliberate effort to protect the sector, to ensure that this sector is brought back. Like I said, the power tariffs, like I said, the duty status. If we want to revive the textile now, there's a lot of modernization that is required. But will we be paying duties that doesn't make sense? For instance, access to foreign exchange. And I keep saying that, for instance, if we generate foreign exchange, we should have access to that foreign exchange to be able to plow back to that. So I'm not taking from your foreign exchange that you generated, for instance. We can look at it that way. So I'm saying deliberate policies, I'm saying deliberate actions that need to be taken. And because they benefit, I think, would outweigh significantly these interventions. Because if we talk, you say, oh, it's money. It's more than that. The policy support must be there. The conducive environment also must be brought to bear.
So in essence, what you're saying is that the future of textile industry, textile garment, cotton is promising.
Oh yes, I believe so. I believe there's light at the end of the tunnel. Why am I saying this? What are industry players saying right now? They too are saying, like, look, perhaps, okay, government has tried, right? Let's see how we can come together. Let's see how we can drive. That's why I said that word that you earlier mentioned, synergy, is key. The linkages must be there. So we're carrying ourselves along now and saying that, look, where do we even go and knock on the doors to have that assistance to jumpstart our process? Because we are commercial. It's about profit at the end of the day, right? But we need that jumpstart. And we need to be able to generate, like I said, a low-hanging fruit, for instance, is that if we continue to support production and the engineers are brought back, we can export our cotton because it's there. But then you are not also affecting positively the textile or the value chain. But in the first instance, can we say you gave me 100 naira and I was able to generate 150 naira? That 50 naira, I plow back.
Okay, we're gradually winding down. If we want to look at other African countries, let's not even go beyond the African continent, in terms of wooing investors, Burkina Faso, Benin Republic, Mali, Cote d'Ivoire are leading producers of cotton. Is Nigeria in any synergy? Since we're talking synergy, if we're talking wooing investors, is Nigeria in any sort of synergy with those leading producers right now? It's unfortunate for the country. You know, we used to lead, but these countries are way ahead. And part of the reasons why their volumes expanded is because of their area expansion and government intervention. Yes, we're seeing our own government intervention, but there are other aspects we can learn from and also woo them to come in.
Unfortunately, there's no direct synergy at the moment.
Why is that?
Simply put, most of these countries believe that if they assist Nigeria, like we're talking of planting material, for instance, then we'll overtake them. We have oil, they don't have oil, you know. It's the mainstay, especially the Francophone countries that you have mentioned. That's their mainstay. And I can tell you a story of where the government of Nigeria actually took the initiative to go to Benin and to talk about, you know, how can we assist and collaborate, research, seed, okay, give us a couple of tons to test. And they just were, you know, turning them around. Never happened. But I'm happy to announce that at the our international summit, the Malian ambassador actually said that they want to collaborate with us, they want to support us. They have this experience in research, in agronomy, and so on and so forth. So we are going to pursue that, and we see what sort of synergies we can build from that, on the back of that.
Laraba, your final question.
Where is the place of Nigeria in the cotton industry as regards exports? Are we exporting, and at what measure?
Okay, are you asking about, you know, cotton itself?
Yes, cotton itself.
We are exporting.
Okay.
Nigeria actually is exporting significant. Well, when I say significantly, more than what is utilized in country because of the lack of capacity of the existing, you know, infrastructure to consume. So we are exporting $64 million in 2022 to that tune. But then again, if you look at, you mentioned Mali, you've mentioned Burkina Faso. The leading country actually last year was Benin Republic, and they did over $630 million of, and you know, it's not value addition, it's just raw cotton. That's why I say that is a low-hanging fruit. Then Burkina Faso, about 400, Mali themselves, about 425, and then Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, and Nigeria is 7th on that list at the moment. So maybe we're ahead of Ghana that did like $950,000, dollars. So yes, we are exporting. I think that we shouldn't be afraid of exporting. I think that we can sit down even with the existing textile companies and say, look, you know what? We're producing 10,000 metric tons. You require 2,000 metric tons. So we can export 8,000 metric tons. We must begin to think in that way. And that's, again, synergy with industry players so that we know exactly what we need to retain, because we have to build our CTG sector back. We have to support ourselves. We have to support the value chain. So these things are critical, and I think that we're on the right track. Yes, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Are we where we ought to be? No. Should we have been better placed? Yes. But look, I always say this. If you try one thing once, don't give up. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. So we have recognized the importance of the sector. We must stick to it. There must be goals, there must be objectives, there must be targets. And if we don't meet it, why do we stop? Why do we now just sit back and say, look, okay, let's just consume, let's just import? So, yeah. Let's hope.
Okay, you just summed up the discussion because you've said it all. There's light at the end of the tunnel, and there's so much we can look within, to get value for what we're putting. Let's say put your money where your mouth is, right? Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Anibe Achimugu, for your time. And we want to encourage the cotton farmers to continue to do their best to ensure that there's return in investment for the nation at large.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Right. He's the National President, National Cotton Association of Nigeria. And our panelist, Laraba, our prospective cotton farmer.
Yes.
Prospective cotton farmer. Thank you so much, Laraba, for your time on platform.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we've been talking cotton production, economic value chain. Yes, the value chain is actually vast. There's a whole lot of potential. If we can look back from where we're coming from, then it will help pave way for where we want to be. We're talking growth, prosperity for the nation, but there's a whole lot of commitment that should be done by the right authorities. That's Platform. Ruth Agwene. Bye.